Christ does not exhaust that which is God. Right? So that which is God has something other than Christ. Has something other than Christ. That which is God includes other than Christ.
That which makes our God named is the divine attributes.
God includes other than Christ.
Again, you're using the term. There's two different senses in which the term can be used, and so you have to be careful in defining the terms.
So, in the sense that you were speaking about God, Christ not exhausting divinity, in that sense, divinity includes other than Christ.
Again, you have to define what you mean.
I'm speaking about whatever definition you have.
So, again, there's two ways in which the word divinity is used, right? There's the possession of divine qualities, the divine attributes, omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence, and so on, benevolence, all these are divine qualities and attributes. The Son possesses those in the fullest sense of the word. But the Son does not, the person of Christ, you don't find the Spirit in the Father, because the Son is one of those three persons. So in one sense, the Son can be said to be a third of God, in one sense. In another sense, he is 100% God.
So there is a sense in which God is divinity.
Sorry?
So there is a sense.
There is a sense, and it's not heresy. Paul, that is the Orthodox Church understanding of the Trinity. It's not. No, it's a heresy if you divide the divine essence, which I don't do.
A third of God is a heresy.
In one sense, it is. It's a sense. It's a heresy if by God you mean the divine essence. If you divide the divine essence, that is indeed the heresy.
I mean it by the definitions of traditional Orthodox Christianity, the creeds of Athanasius.
Yeah, I've read Calvinism, so I'm very familiar with church history.
And the language you use, maybe it's just the language you use, veers off occasionally into heresy. But hey, this is Speaker's Corner. It doesn't really matter.
We're not interested in identifying one's belief as a heretic or orthodox. It's the concept. Is this concept coherent or not? Because what I find is, I still don't understand how you have each person possessing the fullness of God.
Right.
It's not one God. Because you have one God, the Father, and one God, the Son, and one God, the Holy Spirit. Why do you then say that's not three gods, that's one God? Well, clearly, each member is clearly one God.
See, you're putting false dichotomy to me. You're asking to, if I say that the fullness of all that God is exhausted on the Son, then that would be tritheism, because then you have the Father, Son, and Spirit fully exhausting all that God is. That would be tritheism. If, on the other hand, you say that each possesses only a third of the divine essence, that would be postulation. Both of which are heresies.
Just to clarify, what you appear to be saying is that God has parts, okay, in some sense. And you're saying that the parts constitute the three members. Maybe the question is about the nature of what you mean by personhood, okay? Maybe that's the question. You're saying there are three persons, and each of them partake fully in the divine attributes. You said that. But they do not exhaust divinity individually. None of the individual persons exhaust divinity.
They do in one sense, but not in another.
Right. And the sense in which they do exhaust divinity, if you have understood it right, is that they all possess the divine attributes. Right? The essential divine attributes.
Correct.
So the sense in which they do not,
Sorry again?
the sense in which they do not exhaust divinity is something that escapes us.
Okay, that means...
And that seems to reside in what differentiates one person from another person.
Said multiple times, why you don't get this.
Well, maybe we are just...
Yeah, possibly. The person of the Son, you don't find the Father and Spirit. Because the Son is 1/3 of the Trinity.
No, you see, that's what the reason that I think this is we are trying to distinguish, we are trying to understand what it is that distinguishes the Father and Spirit from the Son. That's what we're trying to understand. We are trying to understand whether there's any distinction.
What distinguishes the Father and Son from the Spirit? Great question. So the Father, we play different roles with them.
Forgive me, may I just clarify the question a bit more? If we ask you what is it that distinguishes these three, and you answer in a way which causes us to think that you are saying God has parts, then that would fail. That's why we're asking. Right, so carry on. What is it that distinguishes Father and Son? What is the distinction?
Between the Father Father, Son, and Spirit? Well, they play different roles and function different capacities within the triune Godhead.
They have different capacities.
Yeah, the Son submits to the Father sends the Son to save the world, and the Spirit indwells believers. Those are different roles and functions within the Trinity. So they are distinctive personalities and distinguished in Scripture.
It's not hurting this
Well, Scripture affirms monotheism and affirms the deity of the Father, Son, and Spirit. Do you believe that the New Testament teaches the Trinity?
No.
You don't?
I don't think it's meant.
I don't know
We
any
don't
scholars
think.
think it does. What, do you think it does?
I think it does. Yeah.
Well, where does it say that God is three co-equal persons in the New Testament?
For example, I gave this example last time, I'm going to again. It's a good example. In Mark 1, verses 2 and 3, where Mark quotes from Isaiah 40, and says that there's one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way for Yahweh, make his path straight, which comes from Isaiah 40, and then identifies the one who's preparing the way for Yahweh is John the Baptist, who said, after me comes one who is greater than I, sandals I'm not worthy to untie. So that represents the deity of Christ.
Do you believe Jesus is Yahweh?
That is correct.
Wow, that is a heresy again. I'm impressed you keep on coming up with this stuff.
Actually, that is
According to Mark, not according to you, Jesus is the Son of God. Mark chapter 1, verse 1, this Gospel of Jesus, the Son of God. Nowhere does Mark say that Jesus is Yahweh. That's your.
I just gave you
Yahweh
an
the
example.
Father.
Are you going to respond
in
to my
Mark's
example?
Gospel, Jesus is portrayed as worshipping God, praying to Yahweh, worshipping Yahweh. On the cross, he says to Yahweh, my Yahweh, why have you abandoned me? He says to a man who came to them in Mark 10, why do you call me good? There's no one good but God alone. And he doesn't behave like Yahweh. He behaves like someone who is human, who suffers, who makes mistakes, because there are examples in Mark where he says the smallest of all mustard seeds is actually the smallest of the known mustard seeds in Judea. He's not making a biological statement. He gets that wrong. So he's praying to Yahweh. He worships Yahweh. To say he is Yahweh takes a huge leap of the imagination to get to that point, and I don't think it's there. But you might be on more solid ground in John's Gospel, but John's Gospel is the least historical, according to your own scholars. We can talk about them as well if you want.
We could, but let's finish dealing with the text that I brought up. Let's go back to Mark 1, and then we can move on to other topics. So, Mark 1, verses 2 and 3, could you provide me with, let me just finish the argument, and then, let me finish the argument, and then I'll let you have your time to respond. So, you asked me where the Trinity is in the New Testament, and in Mark, I'll show you in Mark. So, in the same chapter, he goes on to talk about the baptism of Jesus, right, by John the Baptist in the Jordan, and the Father announced from heaven, this is my Son, my beloved Son, well pleased, and the Spirit descended on him as a dove. So that distinguishes between the three individuals, the Father, Son, and Spirit.
What did you say they were called?
Let me finish. In Mark chapter 3, we hear from Jesus that you can blaspheme against the Holy Spirit, and you cannot blaspheme against a being that is not divine. So that teaches the Father, Son, and Spirit. That teaches the deity of the Father, Son, and Spirit, distinguishes them as individuals, and Mark was a monotheist. That is the doctrine of the Trinity.
So coming back to Mark's definition of who Jesus was, this is the NRSV, New Revised Standard Version. The beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So the Son of God is something that Luke calls Adam. The Son of God is something that David is addressed in Psalm number Psalm 2. This is not it's not saying he's Yahweh. If what he was saying is true, it should say the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, Yahweh. It does not say Yahweh. Coming back to the baptism, where is the baptism?
It's in the same chapter, just a little there.
Oh, you're absolutely right. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth, was baptized by John, and as he was coming out of the water, he, presumably, Jesus perhaps, he saw the heavens torn apart, and the Spirit descended on him like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the beloved, my beloved Son. With you I am well pleased." It doesn't say in there that Jesus is Yahweh. In fact, this phrase is used in Psalm number 2, to quote from there. It's also used in the book of Acts, where Peter says, quotes this, "You are my Son, the beloved, today you have become my son. It says today you have become my son. It has a temporal point to it. So it's obviously not Yahweh. He's a beloved son. Lots of people with sons. As Didat once said, the Old Testament has sons by the tons. A cheesy cliche, but I think it's absolutely right. So it doesn't say he's Yahweh. You haven't dealt with the points which contradict him being Yahweh. On the cross, according to Mark, Jesus cries out to Yahweh, saying, my God, why have you abandoned me? Now, there's only one God. Yahweh doesn't abandon himself, and you haven't really addressed that either.
You haven't addressed my exegesis of Mark 1, verses 2 and 3. First of all, Mark, when it says this is the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, first of all, Son of God is actually a textual variant, but be that as it may, because Mark does elsewhere identify Christ as the Son of God.
Yahweh.
You didn't listen to what I said.
I thought you said you were going to prove to me that Jesus was God, Yahweh. You said he was Yahweh, but this says he's the Son of God, not Yahweh. There's a big difference between Yahweh and the Son of God.
You're not listening to what I'm saying. Just hear me out and then you can respond, okay? Mark 1 says the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. First off, Son of God there is actually a textual variant, but be that as it may, because Mark does elsewhere identify Jesus as the Son of God. But in any case, he then, in verses 2 and 3, does apply Isaiah 40 to Christ, which makes him out to be Yahweh, Son of God, in the sense that it is used of Christ in the New Testament, is a title of deity. There's much evidence for that, and in fact I have discussed them in the videos in which I'm reviewing your material.
I need to accept that for him to be
Because you haven't addressed my point. How is the Son of God equal to Yahweh?
the baby speaking,
The Son of God was a man. David was the Son of God. Adam and Luke chapter 3 was the Son of God.
Senses in which the title Son of God is used.
So the Son of God is his own son in some senses. Where in the Bible is the Son of God phrase ever used of Yahweh?
Where in the Bible?
Just we're Mark 1:1 here. We're going through the passage. Where in 1:1 is the Son of God ever used to describe or denote Yahweh? Anywhere in the Bible?
See, this is why you want to moderate the debate, because you know that if other people are playing and we can respond to those.
Can you just tell me where in the Bible is the Son of God?
Okay. Son of God is used in a number of different senses. For example, in Hosea 11:1 it's used of the nation of Israel. In Psalm 7 it's used of David. In Psalm 2 it's used of the installment of the king. In Psalm 45 it's also used of, in Psalm 82 it's used of rulers. It said your God will sons of the Most High. It is used of Yahweh in the New Testament because...
I'm just waiting for all the references I know.
Let me finish responding and then you can hear your time. So,
Thank you very much.
for example, in Matthew 11:27, Jesus identifies as the Son, says no one knows the Son except the Father, no one knows the Father except the Son, is the Son will Spirit with him. In the immediate context of having just quoted from Malachi 3, where he identifies as Yahweh, who was foretold to come to his temple, and the messenger who was going to prepare his way was John the Baptist. And so if John the Baptist is preparing the way for Christ, and Christ says that John the Baptist is the messenger of Malachi 3 verse 1, then he makes himself out to be Yahweh, and in that same chapter he identifies as the Son, thus indicating to us that Son of God isn't, in a sense, Jesus is using it, a divine title. Moreover, Jesus claims exhaustive knowledge of the Father. No mere prophet could have said that. Only someone who possesses a divine quality could say that. So and also in John 5, the Jews pick up sources to stone him because he made God out to be his own Father, thus making himself equal with God. That shows again, and in John 20 verse 28, Thomas says, my Lord and my God, and then later, just a few verses later, says, these things are written that you might believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and that by believing you might have life in his name.
Are you finished?
I finished.
Okay. I don't feel you really addressed what I've asked at all. Many people in the Bible are addressed as Son of God.
Yeah,
For example, the psalmist is called, "You are my son."
Yeah,
Today
I mentioned it. I quoted it myself.
Me, you rather. So David is given the same status as Jesus there, apparently. Luke calls Adam the Son of God in Luke chapter 3, verse 38. So I'm not familiar with anywhere where the Son of God means anything other than doesn't mean Yahweh. You still haven't given me any evidence.
I give you an
Son of
example,
God mean
and
Yahweh.
and I totally listen. See, this is why I don't like to have these bigger corner debates, because you don't listen, and you just keep saying the same thing over and over again, which I've already addressed.
You gave an example that depended on a particular interpretation of McLatchie.
Can are you just terminating it now because I'm responding and you're just dismissing what I'm saying?
Well, you quoted text that I'd already mentioned.
Yeah, but your texts don't add up to the claim that Jesus is claiming to be Yahweh.
Yeah, I said that it's used in different senses, but in the sense Jesus is using it, he does make himself Yahweh.
How do you know what sense Jesus intended?
I gave you.
We only have the texts.
I gave you an example.
The example is in Matthew, yeah? In Matthew? Yeah. But that text doesn't say that Jesus is Yahweh. It says only the Son knows the Father. The Son. That kind of great intimacy of knowledge and familiarity is also demonstrated in the Honi, the circle drawer, who had a great familiarity and intimacy as Son of God with Father. It's a historical reference here. It's not unique to Jesus. There were other people who also were famous for having that kind of intimacy. But Jesus, a bigger picture here, the big problem which you're not going to address, I think, is that Jesus is portrayed as praying to Yahweh. He's portrayed as worshipping Yahweh.
Yeah, yes.
He's shown as not exhibiting any of the characteristics of Yahweh. He doesn't know things. He doesn't know the day to the end. He doesn't know who touched him. God knows all things, for example.
He makes mistakes.
Jesus dies according to the Gospels. We know the Bible teaches that God, or Yahweh, is immortal. Jesus dies, God does not die. God knows all things, Jesus does. Jesus is mortal, God is immortal. He doesn't qualify as Yahweh. Having a knowledge of God he doesn't know everything that God knows, because he doesn't know the date of the end. So Jesus' knowledge is finite, as God's knowledge is infinite. But the key point is, Jesus dies, according to Mark, in despair on the cross, saying, my God, why have you abandoned me? Yahweh would not say that. God does not die, but you believe Jesus as God did die. That is not only unfaithful to what Mark said, but it's also incoherent philosophically, because God cannot kill himself or die.
Okay.
So these are really important points.
Yeah, and I've responded to all those a dozen times.
I've never heard you respond.
I've responded to all of those points.
I didn't hear it.
I'm not.
But I need to go get
can
straight in.
claim-
I'm gonna.
Just one thing that
So you're not going to respond to anything I've just said
I have responded to it a million times.
a million times.
Yeah.
I mean, I have
I have not heard your responses.
No, he thinks
You're not responding to me. I've not heard any of your responses on how you believe Jesus is Yahweh, that Jesus dies and prays to God and doesn't know everything. These are incoherences which you need. I invite you to
you said
suggest.
that you had noticed that I'd made videos concerning those arguments, which I responded
I've not
to.
watched all your videos.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I
But one
respond
of
to
them
all
is
of those.
3 hours long. I'm sorry, I don't have time to hand.
Most of the videos are about an hour.
That's like Gone with the Wind, you know? I mean, you need to make it more concise, my friend. I invite you now to address them in simple language. If you believe Jesus is Yahweh, how come Jesus didn't know how Yahweh knew? Jesus died when Yahweh is immortal, and Jesus prayed and worshipped Yahweh, and there's one God. These are basic questions we just now.
Sorry?
I'm inviting you to respond.
Did Jesus, the flesh, the human being, worship Jesus, the divine? And do they know each other? Do they recognize
They're
each
not
other?
two persons. That would be the heresy of Nestorianism.
Is he fully human?
He is fully human.
So fully human means he has a human will,
That's right.
and fully divine means he has a divine will. So does the divine will interact with the human will, and do they know that the human will, does the human will know that he's got the divine presence within him?
Yeah, I believe.
And do they talk to each other?
I believe that he has one will, not two wills, one will. One will that is
Then he's not fully human.
Sorry?
Because if you're fully human, you have all the human qualities.
He has a will that's in perfect accord with the Father. And that is.
So he has a will.
Yes.
So does this human will worship the divine will, or the divine being within him?
The Son worships the Father, but the Son. But in answer to your question, no.
Does the human Jesus worship the divine Jesus?
No,
Is the
they're
human
one and
Jesus-
the same person, and you're really demonstrating your ignorance of Christian theology on this point, because this is all I'm talking about. But I need to get going. But I'll.
Jonathan, because he's fully human has a fully human will. Because otherwise he's not a human, he's a half human. So as a human being, he has a divine
No, he has
Jesus.
one will, not two wills.
Which will?
One will.
Which one?
One.
The human or the divine?
Both. They come together in one person.
So this is both will.
Yeah.
So when you have the both will together,
You're setting up a false dichotomy here.
it's not possible.
Yeah.
Because if you're fully human, you have to.
It's a man with a will that is given to him by God. It's one will.
He agrees with the divine will. That's what you're saying. Congruent.
It's
So the
congruent
human
with the will of the Father, is what I said.
So the human will of Jesus is agreeing with the divine will of Jesus, the second member of the Trinity.
Again, this is what happened last time. I give you the responses and you keep asking the same questions. And this is why I get tired of talking.
The reason why I know this is, I know you believe Jesus has one nature. But when you say Jesus is fully human and fully God, and then you say he has one will, then he is not fully human or fully God either. Because fully human means he has the human will.
There's two
Isn't
wills.
it?
Orthodox Christianity says he has two wills.
So because there's two wills, the human will agreeing with the divine will. So I want to know whether the human will worship the divine will of Jesus.
I just told you that the answer is no.
Why not? Why doesn't the human Jesus worship the divine Jesus?
One person, not two persons. That would be Nestorianism.
So the human flesh and the divine is not distinct. You're saying they're all somehow not distinct.
I keep giving you responses and you keep asking the same questions.
I got clarification. I know what you believe. Just like somebody said, I believe in one God, but in practice, for example, you believe in three gods working together as one family.
Does the human nature worship the divine?
So does the human nature worship the divine, not the Father, but the Son?
No. I've given you a response now. I didn't get it right. Thank you for...
You're talking about persons.
Why are you running away?
This,
I got to get it.
this question was about persons. About persons, not about nature, not persons.
All right, Jonathan, nice talking to you. Thanks for your time.
Bye,
That's
Jonathan.
arrogancy.
Toodaloo.
It's so